Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to East Central Missouri and the world, and welcome to the James Strong Show podcast number 288. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for making us a part of your day. I appreciate it. This podcast was recorded on the morning of Saturday, October the 15th, from the James Strong Studio in Western St. Charles County. Lots of stuff going on in the news this week. Some of it the same old stuff, some of it different, some of it as normal. I take a look at it and think, well, why aren't more people talking about this? The topic of today's essay has to do with, I call it overlooked opportunities, okay? Inflation is terrible. The stock market's taking a dump. The bond market is no better. You can't find people to work. Those that are working don't seem to be making enough to make ends meet with inflation kicking in the way it is. So you may think to yourself that the world has gone to hell in a handbasket and there's no coming back from that. I kind of disagree. In fact, I absolutely disagree. That's not to say things are wonderful, things are rosy, things are fantastic, things are great. But it is to say that once you clear off the scum on the surface, the pool is in pretty good shape, okay? And I'm going to talk about a couple of opportunities that you may or may not have considered. If you're under 65 years old, these all apply to you. If you're over 65, they may or may not apply to you, but it has to do with opportunities that you have to sock money away tax-free, and especially if you're younger, in fact, the younger, the better opportunities you can take advantage of to have fun and build your wealth, okay? And I'm also going to look at, if you think things are horrible here, I'm going to compare us to our neighbor from the south, Mexico. And if you think things are bad and corrupt here, I think you'll be shocked to learn about some of the statistics on crime and life in Mexico. And after we talk about these, you will think to yourself, wow, no wonder they want to leave and want to come up here. But before I do that, a couple of things that came up in the news. The first one is the term fake news has been overused, to be kind, okay? But I stumbled across something yesterday, and I don't know how this happened or what it was all about, but maybe some of you stumbled upon it as well. And if you run your standard Windows setup on your desktop PC, okay, in the lower right-hand corner, there's a little, just a piece of information. For me, it toggles between the Dow Jones average on the stock market and the temperature, okay? So you can check out the weather, check out the market without going to that site. It's just kind of there at the bottom of the screen, the lower right-hand portion of your screen. And if you take your cursor and hover above that, it'll pop up open some Microsoft News. Now, I never do that, but sometimes your cursor just goes down there and by accident and it pops up, okay? Then you take it away. After a second or two, it goes away. So I accidentally did that. The Microsoft News popped up. And the headline was, Ukraine bombs sites within Russia. And I thought, wow, this is a big deal. So I clicked on it. Now, this is from a Microsoft site, okay? This is not some far wacko site. It wasn't the Babylon Bee or the Onion making fun of things. This was Microsoft, okay? Microsoft News, okay? Which you would think would be a reputable source, all right? And I read the story, and basically it even showed on a map where the Ukraine had bombed cities inside of Russia. And they hit a fuel depot, an ammunitions depot, and an electrical substation with missiles. Now, why is this a big deal? Because Putin said, look, pretty much I'm paraphrasing, but he said, look, if they bomb within Russia, we're launching nuclear weapons. So I'm thinking, this is a huge story. It was short, but again, it even had a map and showed the cities in Russia that Ukraine had bombed. So immediately I thought, okay, it was just like a 2-paragraph story. I need to read more on this. So I went to Drudge Report. Nothing. I went to the Wall Street Journal. Nothing. I went to CNN. Nothing. I went to Fox News. Nothing. And I'm thinking to myself, this is a huge story and nobody else is covering it. Well, maybe it's an exclusive and it takes a little while for others to report on it, okay? A few hours later, I looked, nothing. The next day, this morning, I looked, nothing. And by the way, when you go back to the Microsoft News site, that story has been taken down. So I have to ask, why was it put up to begin with? I know I'm not mistaken. I read this story about how Ukraine bombed sites within Russia. Is it just bad reporting? Did somebody throw something up by accident? I don't know. But it was very, very bizarre. Speaking of Ukraine, if you remember back from my radio days at KLPW, in addition to the James Strong Show, occasionally Tradio, once upon a time the Good Life Show, and a few other things that I would do around there. After the James Strong Show came a show called the Sit Rep Show, and it was produced and hosted by Major Mike Pate, and it was a military show, okay? And often I would stay on and board op for Mike. And Mike was a good host. He was a good military man, but he didn't know the board. I did, so I'd stick around and help out. Often he would have guests in, so I'd set up the mics for him. Sometimes I participated in the show, but for the most part, I was his board op, okay? Mike was a good man. He was a lifelong military man. But one of his big passions after he retired from the military, in addition to helping the veterans out with a multitude of things, he was very active and spent time in Ukraine. And in fact, so much so, he tried to recruit me to work for this organization within the Ukraine. And it would have to do with being like a supply officer, okay? I said, look, I'm not a military guy. He said, you don't need to be a military guy. What you need, he said, you're an organized guy. They can use you. What you need to do is help organize just stuff coming into Ukraine. I said, stuff like what? He said, weapons. I said, why would we want to organize sending weapons into Ukraine? He said, well, because there's going to be a war with Ukraine and Russia. I told him, you know what? Put your money where your mouth is. You find somebody that'll pay me $250,000 a year and I'll do it. Mike said, let me get back to you on that. He never did, so I assumed that nobody wanted to pay that kind of money. I was happy in the job that I had, but for $250,000 a year, sure, I'll do it. I'll do something like that. Ukraine is a fairly westernized country. There's no war over there. I know what Mike said, but what the heck. Mike Pate has been dead for over 4 years. Okay. This was over 5 years ago, probably closer to 6, that he was involved in all this. And it all came true. I'm just telling the story, throwing it out there because I find this very odd, if nothing else. To the conspiracy theorists out there who I don't necessarily agree with, who say, look, this war has been planned for a long, long, long time. Let's say they're wrong. If they're wrong, how do you explain what Major Mike Pate was involved in 5 or 6 years ago? Think about that, please. Speaking of conspiracy theorists, one of the biggest things that I get slammed on, okay, and people who are friends, associates, normally not trolls, say, what in God's name are you doing sticking up for this guy? And it's Alex Jones. And before you turn off the podcast and say, okay, here he goes again with that dopey Alex Jones, let me explain to you what my opinion of Alex Jones is. Maybe was, okay, because it's changed. To me, Alex Jones was entertainment. When he would go off on his highfalutin ideas. It was not unlike Art Bell on Coast to Coast talking about Mel's Hole, or how the Russians dug a hole so deep in the earth that they stuck a microphone down there and they recorded the sounds of hell. Area 51 breaches, alien contact. Okay. Alex Jones was like that. The stuff he threw out there was so out there and so bizarre that nobody would believe it. So it was, in fact, entertaining. And then came Sandy Hook. Okay. And that's where he overstepped his bounds, where he said, look, this didn't happen. It was a government conspiracy. It was a global cabal. It was the New World Order, the Bilderbergers, the Trilateral Commission. But a bunch of kids got killed. Here's the difference between Art Bell and Alex Jones, or even George Norrie and Alex Jones, okay? George Norrie, Art Bell, they throw stuff like that out there, but it's entertaining. And even if it's true or not true, it really doesn't matter. What Alex Jones said about Sandy Hook, it really did matter. You can't lie about that kind of stuff. It's called libel, and it's against the law. And there's a judgment against Alex Jones now for upwards of $1 billion. Now, they'll never get that money because Jones doesn't have that money. But the moral to the story is, and I have said this to many, many people when they come on my podcast, you cannot lie about people. It's against the law. If you lie about people, it's called libel. If you do something against them, it's called slander. Maybe it's the other way around. I always get it mixed up, okay? But that's the only rule I have when you come on my podcast. You cannot lie about people. It's wrong and it's against the law. Don't believe it? Ask Alex Jones. Okay, the essay today, overlooked opportunities. Okay, I'm a big fan of this country, and maybe I'm just a flag waver. I don't know, but I'm a big fan of the U.S. I'm a big fan of the lifestyle that freedom gives us in all of the Western world, and that's the U.S., that's Canada, that's Western Europe, that's Japan, that's Korea, that's Australia, there's other countries out there, okay? The West is not a geographic area anymore. It's a group of governments that have a lifestyle. That's the West, okay? And you think to yourself, well, how can you be so big on the West? We have this, that, and that scandal, and this is wrong, and this is bad, which all of us, this is true. But it's still the best system out there, and nothing else comes close. That doesn't mean perfect. That doesn't mean room for improvement. That doesn't mean we should do our best to do better. What that means is if we are A is better than B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, etc. Okay? It's just the best. Even when you talk about our law enforcement, even when you talk about our judicial system, even when you talk about our court system, which has taken a tumble in recent years, in my opinion. Let's compare it to our neighbor from the south, Mexico. And again, this is not comparing it to the Democratic Republic of the Congo, which is nowhere near us. This is not comparing it to North Korea. This is not comparing it to Tonga. This is comparing it to Mexico, our number 2 trading partner and neighbor to the south. Mexico's president, President Andrés Manuel López Obrador, he's the president of Mexico. Okay, he's been president of Mexico for 4 years. He's got 2 more years to go. Now, the way the Mexican presidency works, and actually, I believe this is a better system than ours. You can be president one time. Okay, it's a 6-year term, not a 4-year term. 6-year term. You can't run for re-election. So when you get elected, you got 6 years to do your thing, and then you're out. And they're like us. They have a 2-party system. There's other parties, but basically they have a 2-party system. And they go back and forth for the most part. If these guys do well, then the new guy gets reelected. If they don't do well, they go to the other party. Or Mr. López Obrador was the other party, the Liberal Party, okay? And they elected him because he came to power, because he promised to fight corruption, crime, impunity. But 4 years into his tenure, most crimes remain uninvestigated. And the country's attorney general faces public criticism that he's stalled on high-profile cases. How bad is law enforcement and the judicial system in Mexico? Check this out. Mexican prosecutors investigated and took legal action on 4.4% of reported federal crimes in 2020. And that's down from 2018. In 2018, it was only 5.4%. They're taking action on less now than they were then. That's according to the analysis on federal government data that was conducted by a think tank called Mexico Evoluta. That's a nonpartisan think tank partially funded by the U.S. and Canadian governments. Now, on a state level, not a national level, because Mexico has states also. In fact, it's the United States of Mexico, they call it in Spanish. But at the state level, 1 in 10 crimes in Mexico were reported to prosecutors. 1 in 10. And of those 1 in 10, state prosecutors across the country only brought presumed criminals before a judge 3% of the time. So think about that. I'm going to repeat that because it's worth repeating. At a state level, 1 in 10 crimes in Mexico were reported to prosecutors last year. And of those, state prosecutors across the country only brought presumed criminals before a judge 3% of the time. So of all the crimes reported, only 10% of those were brought to the prosecutor. And of all those brought to the prosecutor, only 3% of those ever brought anybody before a judge. And other reports say that way less than half the crimes in Mexico are even reported. So if less than half are reported, of those that are reported, only 10% are brought to prosecutors, and of that 10%, if only 3% are brought in front of a judge, virtually nobody pays for a crime. So that's why crime is rampant in Mexico. Because if they report it, and if the police look at it, and even if they bring it to a prosecutor, you're probably not going to go before a judge. Now, the report doesn't say anything, but of those 3% that were brought in front of a judge, I got to think 100% of them weren't even convicted. Some of them were found innocent. The report doesn't say that. I'm making that assumption. Now, compare that to how it is in the U.S. About 46% of victims reported violent crimes nationally in 2021. That means 54% didn't even report them, okay? Now, I have to think that's not in areas like, those are in high crime areas where they don't trust the police, okay? Out here in the suburbs, violent crime is reported, okay? But of those that are reported, U.S. federal attorneys filed charges against 83% of suspects in matters concluded. That was fiscal year 2020. So, in other words, if a crime is reported, 83% of the time, they find the guy and they bring him in front of or gal, and they bring him in front of the judge. That's actually pretty doggone good. Compared to 10%, then 3% of the 10. Now, Mexican data attests to the huge task that Mr. Lopez Obrador faces to deliver his promises of radical change. The 68-year-old nationalist candidate took office in 2018 after a landslide victory in the midst of promises to abate crime and impunity, end government corruption, raise welfare benefits, and bolster the government's role in the economy. Now, while Mr. Lopez Obrador's approval ratings are around 60%, most Mexicans, 66%, say that their insecurity has raised since he's been president. So they think it's worse, but they still think the guy's okay. About 79% of Mexicans believe impunity has risen or remained unchanged since Mr. Lopez Obrador took office in 2018. That's according to a survey by Impunidad Cero. That's a Mexican government accountability nonprofit firm. Now, law enforcement is a responsibility shared between feds and local authorities. And in many Mexican states, the federal government is effectively in charge because, well, the local government is failed. Over 100,000 soldiers and federal agents run some of these failed states. Now, half of those surveyed in National Statistic Agency considered reporting crimes a waste of time or said they mistrust the authorities. And little has changed over the past 4 years. Now, the United States State Department recently reissued a travel advisory to several states in Mexico after gang-led violence flared in August in the key export manufacturing hubs of Tijuana and Ciudad Juarez and the industrial centers of Jalisco and Guanajuato. Now, last year, U.S. government temporarily halted all Mexican U.S.-bound avocado exports to protect inspectors and combat extortions by organized crime. Yeah, last year, basically, organized crime in Mexico took over the entire avocado industry. Not sure that has gotten any better. In fact, that's one reason why I was going to go to Mexico late this summer. But basically, the government said, nah, don't go there. Because they've always had problems with crime. They've always had problems with gang violence. But you know what? If you go there in mid-morning and you're out by mid-afternoon, life is good. Well, there's a new thing going on down there, and it's kidnapping. Now, what happens is they kidnap you, somebody pays a ransom, and they let you go. Rarely do you die. But I don't want to get kidnapped, okay? And I'm only making an assumption that my family loves me enough to pay a ransom, okay? So if you think things are bad here, think of how they are elsewhere. And then ask yourself, maybe I understand fully why people want to come El Norte from Mexico to escape that mess. To get back on a positive note, because remember, I talked about overlooked opportunities. I wanted to lead in with that story about Mexico because, again, there's no opportunities in this country. Strong, we're so corrupt. Okay, comparatively speaking, no, we're not. And I've always considered myself pretty much up on stuff when it comes to tax savings and different things that you can do to save money and stash away money tax-free. And one of the things that I do, and my employer helps us with that because that's the way our healthcare insurance is set up where I work, the day job, is an HSA. That's a health savings account. And they offer fantastic benefits, especially if you have one of those accounts that, like I have, it's got a high deductible type of insurance policy. In other words, you're paying the first, say, $2,500, okay? But after that, you're good. And I guess that's really true insurance, where if you get sick, you got to pay a doctor. While $2,500 is hard to pay, it's not a deal breaker. But if you go to the hospital and have to pay $250,000, that will bankrupt you, okay? So it's to prevent against that. And an HSA, a health savings account, what that is it's an account that's set up. Your employer pays in a little bit, and you can pay in as much as you want, well, within reason, up to $7,750 for a family. And then you can just pay your bills out of that. Now, you think to yourself, well, big deal. So you're taking it out of one pot instead of the other. No, it is a big deal. Because what you do is you put that money in and you're not taxed on it. In Missouri, you're not taxed on the state tax or the federal tax. In fact, every state except for California and New Jersey, I think, it's tax-free, both state and federal. So you're paying your doctor bills anyway. You're just paying them tax-free. Now, here's what I didn't know, okay? First of all, HSAs are tax-free funds paired with high qualified, non-deductible health insurance plans. So if your employer doesn't have it, you can't do it. But it lets you, the HSA funds can either be withdrawn to cover unreimbursed medical expenses like co-payments, or just left in the account and invested for tax-free growth. In other words, you can just keep your money in your HSA if you want to and let it go ahead and grow. Now, you think to yourself, well, It's the same thing as an IRA then. You got to pay tax when you take it out. No, you don't. You don't pay, it's tax-free going in, and you don't pay tax when it comes out. But here's the thing. If it comes out, you got to pay a medical bill. But it's just not a medical bill, and I didn't know this, because for many people, the two best HSA benefits are the tax saving and the flexibility. Handled correctly, HSA funds are triple tax-free. No tax going in, tax-free growth, and tax-free withdrawal. Makes it better than a traditional or a Roth IRA. And there's no legislation trying to get rid of that, whereas there is rumblings about getting rid of Roth IRAs. Now, a tax-free withdrawal kicks in so long as the account owner saves receipts, proving eligibility of health-related expenses. Now, reimbursements can even be claimed years later when the owner really needs tax-free cash. Now, another surprising HSA feature is the savings head start they can provide for young people. But that's another story. In other words, if you're young and you start, say you start an HSA when you're 25 years old, 26 years old, and you don't get sick, so don't worry about it. Okay, 30 years later, you've got a huge nest egg that's grown. You put that money in tax-free. The interest you earned is tax-free. And when you start paying medical bills, say when your wife has a child, then you can take it out tax-free once again. Okay. Now, here's the other thing about an HSA that I did not know. Okay. Is you can pay off just not your medical bills, but if you quit your job, you can use it to pay your COBRA. If you go on to Medicare after you retire at age 65, you can use it to pay your Medicare Part B premiums. You can use it to buy aspirin. You can use it to buy eyeglasses. You can use it to buy solution for your contact lenses. Not just medical bills, but not just prescription medical bills, but other medical bills. Now, you can't have an HSA if you have a flexible spending account. You can have one, you can't have both. But again, how do you claim reimbursements for expenses? It's easy. Unlike a flexible spending account, an HSA owner doesn't have to submit receipts, just produce them if they're asked. In other words, if you're audited, you're going to have to produce the receipts. Now, what's the chance of the average Joe being audited? Not very likely. And the receipts, most of them are probably on your charge cards anyway. And by the way, when you file your tax return at the end of the year, you've kind of already had the receipts, or at least check the boxes. So do you have to keep receipts? You should. Will the world come to an end if you don't? No, because no one's probably going to ask for them. Okay. And you can use an HSA for your spouse. I do. My wife and I, she doesn't have an HSA. She has a different type of insurance plan. I have my insurance. She has her insurance. That's just the way we do it. It works out best for us. But if she gets sick, she can use my HSA account, even though it's on hers, not mine. So it can be used for your wife. If you own a business that's reported on a Schedule C, you can have an HSA. HSAs are just very, very cool. And one thing I did not know about it is once you get to be 55 or older, you can contribute an extra $1,000 a year. So for an individual like me, because it's just me on my HSA, it's $38.50 a year starting next year, plus $1,000, so it's $48.50 a year. That's $48.50 in tax-free savings, both going in, earning interest, coming out. That's a huge deal. And like I said before, unlike a traditional IRA where you have to take it out eventually and pay taxes on it, in theory you're going to pay less because you're going to take it out at a different time, but that's not guaranteed. Or like a Roth IRA where you have to pay tax before you put it in, and now there's even legislation saying, yeah, well, maybe we're going to tax you when you take it out too. No one's looking at HSAs because basically that's a good way, an easy way for you to pay your own way through your medical bills. But Uncle Sugar just helps you out a little bit because you're not taxed. If you have an opportunity, look into an HSA, okay? Now, if you're a young person, you may think, why do I need something like that? Old people, sure. Young people, not so much. Well, young people probably need it more than older people because, again, like anything else, like investing in anything else, if you start younger, the potential of having more in there is better. And start taking it out, because if you never see it, you don't miss it. Have your boss take it out as part of your payroll savings plan. HSAs, look into it. If you can do it, my recommendation would be, please, absolutely do it. There's no good jobs anymore. It's not like the old days where you have a union job, you stay forever, you retire, you get a gold watch and a pension, and life is good. Okay? None of those jobs exist anymore, right? Absolutely, positively wrong. In fact, there's a lot of good companies out there. And I'm going to talk about these good companies. There was an institute called Burning Glass. It's a Philadelphia think tank started by Howard Schultz and the Schultz Family Foundation. That's the Starbucks guy. Some other people were involved in it. And basically what it does is it looks at top companies, and there's a criteria for saying this is a top company. And that criteria is pretty good. It has to do with the rate that they hire workers without a bachelor's degree, hires inexperienced workers, promotes workers from within, retains workers for 5 years or more, fills top jobs from within, the time it takes for workers to advance one level in a company, what type of wages it pays, that's the one that everybody looks at first, right? And how it fills openings through internal promotions, and, which is kind of important too, workers who do leave, the percentage of workers that leave that go on to higher level jobs at other companies. And I'm going to read these lists and talk about them. And you may think to yourself, well, Strong, some of them aren't even around here. Why do they apply? What I'm getting at is this is a list of companies who do this stuff. And these are all good things. And I've been very fortunate in my career. I have worked since I graduated high school. I've worked for 3 companies. That's it. As my full part-time job. I've had lots and lots and lots of gig jobs in radio and manufacturing and fill in the blank, okay? But the day job, the job that pays the lion's share of the bills, I've worked for 3 companies. The first one was right out of high school, a machine shop. I saw very early in my employment with that company that this was not a place to be for long. This was a place to learn and move on. So I stayed there a little more than a year. From there, I went to a machine tool manufacturer, and I stayed there for 23 years. I then went to my present job. I've been there for over 20 years. So you think to yourself, okay, Strong, what does this have to do with me? Well, I always did my homework before I signed on with an employer, except for the first time because I was a dopey kid. And I always thought to myself, okay, how is this going to benefit me? How is this company going to be good for me? And I never left one job for another until I determined, you know what, this place is a positive change for me where I can go ahead and make more money, have more fun, enjoy my career more, okay? So I've been very fortunate in that I did my homework, okay? I suggested you do your homework too. But consider these companies. In fact, here's the top 10 companies for economic and job opportunities. Some of them are around here, some of them aren't. AT&T, they're around here. American Express, they're around here. Cisco Systems, PG&E, and they're not around here. Microsoft, Fisher RV, Southwest Airlines, Liberty Mutual Insurance, International Paper, and HF Sinclair. Now again, the criteria was they hire workers without bachelor's degrees, they hire inexperienced workers, they promote from within, fill jobs from within, how long does it take to advance, how much does it pay, and if you do leave, you leave for a better job. Now, Burning Glass, again, that's that think tank who put this information together. Burning Glass and its partners assign scores to 9 different categories, such as how many employees get promoted, the average time it gets promoted, and we talked about that. And that, in fact, according to Burning Glass Institute President Matt Singelman, where you work turns out to be one of those decisions that has really big consequences. But the problem is workers don't have the visibility to make an informed choice. Well, yeah, you do. You can go to Glassdoor, you can go to Indeed, you can go to a lot of places that talk about the company. And these are people who have worked at the company or still work at the company and give reviews. So you can tell from those reviews that you find online whether this is going to be a good company or not. Now, whether you wind up at a company that's not an escalator for mobility or a treadmill, whether you wind up at a company that is an escalator for mobility or a treadmill, that's a big deal. For a lot of people, it's a crapshoot, but not if you do your homework, okay? Now, the companies that provided the most mobility, according to this study, were among the most familiar names in corporate America. Telecommunications giant AT&T and American Express, Cisco Systems, they had the three highest composite scores in what Burning Glass calls the American Opportunity Index. The utility PG&E out in California or the West Coast, and Microsoft, they rounded out the top five. Now at AT&T, check this out. At AT&T, there are tens of thousands of installers, retail store clerks, and other frontline workers among its more than 172,000 employees. That's right, they employ 172,000 people. And of those people, fewer than 5% of the job openings even require a college degree. Well, you got to have a college degree before you do anything strong. No, you don't. Not at AT&T, you don't. The company trains new hires for many roles, and top managers are often recruited from company ranks. That includes the chief executive officer, John Stankey. He does have a college degree, but he started the company more than 30 years ago, taking customer requests for phone service. That's how he started out, okay? You can come in, become a tech on the front line. You can work in retail. You can go ahead and work at a call center. AT&T is very much about bringing individuals in and then training them. Well, I don't know anything about being a technician for telephones. Well, okay, don't worry about it. They'll train you on the job training, and they pay you for it. How is that bad? Now, once you get in, what are the top companies for advancement? Again, AT&T, ADP, that's automatic data processing. ADP is the data processors. You've heard of them. AutoZone, Dollar General, The Gap, Lowe's, Macy's, Nordstrom's, Sherwin-Williams, and Verizon. Now, you may say to yourself, well, those are just retail stores. Well, okay, check this out. One industry, and you noticed here, that did very well was retail, like The Gap, Nordstrom's, Macy's, okay, and Verizon too, and AT&T, telecommunications companies. But to direct, retail is a way that you can advance. In other words, you may not want to be the dopey person on the floor, but here's the thing. With those companies, you're not there long. In other words, you're paying your dues, you're learning, and then you advance. In fact, two direct retail competitors, Dollar General and Dollar Tree, fared very much differently, very, very differently. Dollar General, they've got over 18,000 stores, did better in a measure where how quickly you get promotions, okay? In other words, if you work for Dollar General, you get promoted really quickly. Mainly that's because they're opening a lot of stores and they need managers. Dollar Tree, they didn't do such a great job, but they offer more opportunities to people with college degrees. In other words, Dollar General would kind of like you to have a degree. Dollar Tree, not so much. Now, Dollar General employees move up frequently and quickly, in part due to the pace of their store openings. That's according to Kathy Reardon. She's the retailer's chief people officer. Now, the company has in recent years filled more than 2,000 new management and assistant manager positions annually. Now, it mostly plucks from its existing workforce. Around 75% of Dollar General's store managers were internally promoted. That's according to COO Jeff Owen, okay? And by the way, He'll take over for the CEO's job on November 1st. And he started in 1992 as a store manager trainee. Now he's going to run the whole farm, okay? Now, on the average, part-time sales associates can be promoted and to lead associate within 6 months, then to assistant manager within a year, and to store manager within 3 years, okay? And again, they're training you and paying you for this. In fact, Donna Hernandez, she was a 19-year-old waitress with a high school diploma when she was offered a job as a part-time associate at Dollar General in Bridgeport, Texas. That was in 1998. Within a year, she was the store manager. Today, Divisional Vice President of Store Operations. She oversees 2,400 locations in Tennessee, Kentucky, and neighboring states. All promoted from within without a college degree. Now, some of these companies were springboards to better jobs elsewhere. Launchpad companies, they call them. In other words, you may not work there for long, but you go on to some other company. In other words, a good place to start. Those companies, and you've heard of most of them, and most of them are around here. CVS, Expeditors International, Fannie Mae, Liberty Mutual Insurance, Marsh & McLennan, insurance people. There are insurance people. Murphy USA, Nucor, steel manufacturers, State Farm Insurance, U.S. Steel, Verizon. 2 steel companies you think that are dead, are outstanding as springboards to other industries. I find that fascinating, okay? Now, drugstore chains like CVS, they rank high just because of the sheer volume of entry-level workers that they tend to hire. Basically, if you have a heartbeat, they're going to hire you at CVS. If you don't like it, that's okay. You've picked up skills. You can go someplace else. In fact, pharmacies, for instance, a lot of pharmacies are so short-staffed that people are working 40-plus hours a week. That was the old deal in the machine shop business, okay? Most machine shops, back when I started in the trade, nobody worked 40 hours a week. Your hourly pay, especially if you're just starting out, wasn't bad. But a 50-hour paycheck where 10 hours, that was time and a half, the hourly wage wasn't great, but the paycheck on Friday was pretty doggone good, okay? Making money with overtime, okay? Basically, it's there for the asking. Now, there are also other companies, if you don't want to just start with a company and go ahead and move on, companies that provide stability. In other words, a company that you want to work for them and work for them for the rest of your life. Now, the adage is, nobody does that anymore. Yeah, they do. Those companies, Adobe, Alphabet, that's Google, folks, Boeing, Eli Lilly, ExxonMobil, Freddie Mac, L3 Harris, Lumen, NVIDIA, and Raytheon. Now, ExxonMobil is an interesting one because despite the boom and bust nature of the gas and oil business, so many of those companies are manufacturers like that, okay? The industry that's known for paying well is the gas and oil industry because it's up and down. It's boom and bust. They know they have to retain their people because they know that even though times are bad, they're going to be good again. Now, among the leading companies in job stability, like I said, is ExxonMobil. And that's because the company really never had any large-scale layoffs until 2020, okay? Generally, ExxonMobil has preferred to retain their people because they don't want to have to go ahead and retrain them. So you kind of have golden handcuffs if you work for them. Yeah, maybe I'd like to leave, but I can't make any more money anywhere else. If you don't hate your job, how is it bad to be paid better than anybody else in your industry, okay? Now, the average tenure for Exxon employees, more than 30 years. And they're a huge company. The average guy's there 30 years. That's according to company spokesman Casey Norton, who added that even within a high-paying industry, the company's compensation package is at the high end if you stick around. Now, you say to yourself, okay, fine. I'm not a petroleum engineer. I can't work for those people. Okay, the best companies to start at without a degree, Albertsons, Arrow Electronics, Applied Materials, AT&T, there we go again, CDW, Dollar Tree, Estee Lauder, MasterCard, and U.S. Bank Corp. So, again, I'm not saying you should start working for these companies tomorrow. The reason I mention this is because there's a lot of companies out there, some of them big, some of them not so big, who are going to do a good job as an employer. There's a lot of good employers out there. There's a lot that aren't so good, but there's a lot of them that are good. And again, this whole Burning Glass Institute study was very eye-opening, very informative. But you can get similar information off of sites like Glassdoor, Indeed, and there's other ones. All you got to do is if you're looking to work at a company, let's say you're looking to, I'll say Anheuser-Busch. I just throw them out there. Google Anheuser-Busch jobs, okay, and click on some of those sites. They're going to have reviews from past or present employees about that company. And you can kind of weed through them. I mean, some of them are saying like, yeah, this place is terrible. They want you to come in at 8 o'clock in the morning and work hard until 5 in the afternoon. Okay, well, you're just a slacker and you don't like to work there, okay? A lot of them say, yeah, I only get 16 smoke breaks during the day. I don't want to work there. You can look through that. A lot of other ones say, look, the boss is a pretty sharp guy and he's listens to you and the compensation package is good. The cons are you get your hands dirty. Okay. If you don't mind getting your hands dirty, you can go ahead and get ahead. That's what I'm trying to say. It's just like a hotel review. Okay. I don't like this hotel because they didn't let me and my 17 kids in. Well, okay. I don't want to be at a hotel with 17 kids, so I like this place, all right? So one guy's smile can be another guy's frown and vice versa. So what I'm getting at is, folks, there are tons and tons and tons and tons of jobs out there that are fantastic, okay, that are really great. So if you don't like your job, look for another one. If you like your job or don't like your job, look for another one, and maybe you'll realize that you're in the right place after all. Or you just may jump ship and go someplace else. Quitting is not the same as quiet quitting, okay? That's it. We're done. Hey, until next time, jamesstrongshow@hotmail.com. That's the email address. Send me your email. I'll send you a link. Until next time, this is James Strong saying adios.